morning, everyone. My name is Petter Johansson. I'm the CCO of Pulse and Retail. And we're talking about how to brand your way into China today. And I've invited Josh Gardner, the CEO of Kung Fu Data, the expert on the matter. So I'm going to hand over to you now, Josh, for your presentation, and then we will do a round of questions, Q&A afterwards. And Josh is happy to answer all your questions, at least regarding Asia and China, I guess.
Yeah, just China, please, not even Asia.
Okay.
So welcome, everyone. Good morning. I hope you have a nice cup of coffee because this presentation is usually very lively. Let's start with, I am grateful you attending, and thank you to Peter and his team for having me out here to share. A bit about me, I am the CEO and co-founder of Kung Fu Data and e-commerce group, whose sole mission is to help brands thrive in China's online marketplaces. And to that end, I hope today's session is both eye-opening and inspiring as we take a little walk into the unique world of China e-commerce. And here we go. Oops, hold on. Why is this? I'm sorry, this is in the way. Okay, I guess you just do that. So about 6 months ago, actually it was more, I think it was 7 or 8 months ago before the world ended, I had a client flying in on one of those things called an airplane before they shut them all down. He was coming into Shanghai and he's a very big client and I wanted to impress him. So I asked my team, I said, where should we take him? And one of the guys on my team like immediately blurted out, Din Tai Fung. And I thought to myself, well, yeah, okay, you know, it's okay, right? But at the same time that he blurted that out, the rest of my team, all my account managers and brand managers started nodding their head, Din Tai Fung, Din Tai Fung. It's like, oh, yeah, it's good, it's good, it's good. And I was like, so what's okay? They're like, no, it's perfect. And I'm like, all right, we'll go to Din Tai Fung. And it just blew me away. I was like, how could this Taiwanese restaurant chain be so top of mind for a group of local operators and brand managers in Shanghai? I mean, think about it. This is a Taiwanese restaurant and Shanghai probably has what, 5-10 million restaurants? China has hundreds of millions of restaurants. And yet this was the one thing that came into their mind as being like the ultimate place to take a foreigner for an executive lunch. And so I was very curious. I asked them, I said, well, you know, how did you find out about it? And the next thing that came out of each and every one of their mouths, it wasn't that what they told me I didn't understand. It was one remarkable feature. Not one of them gave us the same answer. So every single person discovered this brand in a different way that I hadn't thought of. And that's when I noticed that, you know, as a brand, your job, your one job is to understand that true moment of interest when your brand resonates with a consumer, and that to be sort of humble and respectful of a place like China, that it may be very different there than in your home market, right? Things happen in different ways in China. Let me give you an example. I tell people that what Jack Ma built is unique, and what I hear them say is, no, Taobao is a flea market, it's like eBay, and Tmall is like Amazon. And I'm like, actually, it's not like that at all. Tmall, if you want to be specific, is a button. It's a status symbol and something much, much bigger. A place where 850 million people begin and end their journey to purchase anything under the sun. And that's Taobao. Taobao is the largest online marketplace in the world. And I think people don't realize how powerful it is and how magical it is as an experience for consumers. So I think the best way for me to show you is to actually walk through purchasing on Taobao, so you can see what it's like for us as consumers, and if you're a Taobao merchant, what it's like to service those consumers. So I asked one of my accounts team to go shop for a floor lamp for the office. And so she, went on looking for a high-end floor lamp. What you're looking at here are screenshots of her iPhone. And So she types in up here on the left, you know, you go into Taobao, you type in what you want, and you get a listing that looks like Amazon, right? Like any kind of product shopping on Amazon. And you click the link, and then with 2 finger taps, you have your coupons. But here's something unique. With a swipe of your finger, you can drop that link directly into a customer service chat. So notice the second count. You ask a question. So you're 17 seconds into this merchant site. And while you're waiting for a response, you click on this button down at the bottom here called Buyer's Collection. The minute you do that, you essentially enter an area of every store on Taobao that has the entire functionality of Pinterest as an application, right in every store. Now, over here on the right, you notice you get a response from the CS rep. Look at the timestamp, 25 seconds. So I post my question at 17, and 8 seconds later, a real human being replies to my question. So you're impressed, right? So my assistant's impressed. So she types in another question, and while she's waiting, she clicks here, Ask Everyone. And Ask Everyone is another feature in a Taobao store. It's a place where people who bought from you and people who want to buy from you talk without your interference. So as the merchant, you can't control this conversation. It's like Airbnb. So if you're not a good services provider, they can talk about it freely without your ability to edit. But to get into that, you have to follow the store, which immediately sets you up to be doing Twitter and Instagram within this store, the same functionality. You go over here, you check in, that's Foursquare. You get your points here, that's gamification. You ask more questions, you talk to the CS, you talk to the crew, and eventually you pick out what you want, you add it to cart, you click buy now, and with a thumbprint using Alipay, you pay and you check out. That took 1 minute and 17 seconds. The functionality of 15 applications on your phone is in every single merchant store on Taobao for free. Now, while you're realizing how impressive that ecosystem is and that functionality and speed and power, I want you to think about this. That was factory direct. This should keep you up at night. Taobao has 60 million active stores. That's competitors if you're a brand. And of that 60 million, 10 million make the stuff they sell. So you're gonna get that level of service from a factory direct. So how can you compete? And while you're mulling over that, remember, Google is irrelevant in China. It's blocked anyway. People don't actually search to buy things in China. They search for brands, not things, okay? Are you ready for this? This is what the consumer journey looks like in China. This is what we call a path to purchase. It is this complicated, it is this elaborate, and there are so many what we call influence nodes, so moments when something influences a consumer. It is a combination, this ecosystem, of this web of influence, of people, of communities, of commerce, and of individual influential people, like influencers themselves, through influential applications and routes that end up eventually getting you to click buy now. Now, that's something that should very much concern you, because most people, when they think of e-commerce, they think of doing long tail marketing, which is essentially what you do in Amazon. You can't make money on the long tail in China. I'm going to show you why in a minute. But let's just get these two concepts right. First, the path to purchase is much more complicated, sophisticated, and elaborate. And it is in and outside the transaction space, like Alibaba. It's outside of that too. Second, people in China search for brands, not things, okay? And even if they search for a thing, what appears in the results is brands, the ones that have won. So no matter what, you're back to having a brand that they want. Now, when we look at consumer purchase journeys, I want to give you an example of just 3 for the sake of time. So let's start with one very common one. I'm sure you guys have all heard of TikTok, right? In your home markets, everyone's doing these short videos. If you haven't heard of it, look it up. It's wildly popular in places like the UK now. And this is a viral video platform. It is an AI-driven platform. It is the most honest and fair creators platform, which is why it took off in China. 3 years ago, it didn't exist. It has almost 1 billion users. It has Facebook's traction after 10 years in 3. Now, when you go into Douyin and you watch a video, what you might also not understand is that Douyin is the biggest activation platform in the world right now. It is so powerful and it is growing so fast that it's overtaken Tencent, which is WeChat. So in China, we use WeChat for our lives, right? I live on WeChat. My business is on WeChat. I run everything on WeChat. But I no longer spend a lot of time there. Like all Chinese consumers and others, we're spending a lot of our time on the entertainment value and community and interaction we get in Douyin, which is TikTok in China. And it's significant in one point. I told you about Taobao, but what you don't realize is that Jack Ma and his team understood that Taobao had limitations, that it was going to be starved for traffic and reach its peak. So what did they do? They bought, invested in, or integrated every single activation space out there that they could. And Douyin is integrated directly into Taobao. So what you're looking at here, I watched this video, this product link can be clicked and go straight into Taobao to make that purchase, right? Now, another thing you guys know is now popular. I'm sure you're hearing about this in your home country, is called live streaming, right? Essentially, live streaming, it's a very simple thing, right? It's the total functionality of home shopping club networks like TV shopping in every single merchant store on Taobao. So the power of a TV station broadcast with a host, adding in this live functionality where you can directly like chat to this host on here and actually interact with her team and get answers to your questions. It's exactly this, right? And you run small segments. Now we use live stream every day and it's a very successful way to sell. But what you didn't know is that Alibaba has a near monopoly position on it, which is 80% as their own platform, Taobao live stream. But if you include the Douyin integration I just mentioned, their share is about 95% of all live stream, which is the single fastest growing e-commerce channel in the world right now, right? Notice that you can go directly into a live stream, see a host, and while you're watching, you click the offer, boom, you buy it right inside Taobao. And a more traditional thing that, traditional meaning something that's very common would be someone going on to Red, Little Red Book, which is a community site where all the influencers and consumers can talk about and discuss the brands they like. And most people follow influencers on this platform. These influencers live all over the world. They travel everywhere, and they particularly like Northern Europe, right? So you probably see these women and these men all over the streets of Scandinavia during normal times, right? When people have airplanes to travel on. But normally you would see them and they might write an article about a bag and, something like this. And what happens is once you've read this and you've been influenced, you might ask your friend what they think of the brand and they say it's great. Then you see a few other things. You go to Taobao, search for the brand and check out. That's only 3 of hundreds of ways Chinese consumers engage with you. And so what does that mean for merchants? It's simple. It's a gladiator battle for screen real estate. It is brutal. This phone right here is 50 square centimeters, that screen. And as you can see, look it up, Jack Ma just published Alibaba's latest fiscal year results. They processed $1 trillion through that phone screen, which makes that the most valuable real estate in the world. And so we're all fighting for it. But what's happened recently is that we used to just fight for what we call old real estate, right? We used to just have to do search marketing and pay-per-click and other kinds of performance marketing and event marketing to drive results, but that's no longer good enough. Now, Alibaba's integrated with Douyin, with Red, with everything they possibly can because they want to own the entire path to purchase. So now we're fighting for real estate everywhere, right? And it's super competitive. And the end result of that gladiator battle, the end result is that basically 10% of stores and brands control 90% of sales. And you are looking at 3 brands in my portfolio. We run 15 brands on Tmall and JD. And this is what it looks like. When you win conclusively. And you win at a level that you don't normally in other countries. Because You can make money on the long tail in places like Amazon. You cannot do it here, right? It's super, super, super hard. Even in what they call quote unquote long tail categories, it looks like this. These three brands are in long tail categories, and yet we are completely dominant, right? So another statistic to keep in mind is that 5% of stores, 5, do 1 million euro or more. That's it, 1 out of 20. So when you hear stories of unicorns and fairy tales of leprechauns throwing clovers and gold pots at you for coming to China, it is not true, okay? To give you an idea of the scale, 60 million stores, right? 60 million, including Tmall and Taobao, and only 5% of them do more than $1 million. And that's just something for you to think about before you enter. You really need to pay attention, because in every category that we operate, whatever brand we're taking on, we want to dominate whatever subcategory we're in, or at least be in the top 5, so that we can actually make money. And there's a reason for all of this, and that is traffic is branded in most categories. It's branded. So what do you need to win? You need an unfair advantage. If you call up any startup accelerator in Shanghai, you call up any venture capital firm and you say, hey, I'm a foreigner and I've got this great idea and I'm going to come to China, and you ask them, hey, what do I need to be successful? You'll hear 2 words out of their mouths: unfair advantage. Tell me what you got, show me an unfair advantage, and show me how it's defendable, or don't waste your time. Because China is that competitive. You are up against factory direct, 10 million factory direct stores. You've got to have something special, and you've got to have traction. So there's 3 kinds of unfair advantage that we encounter most. There's other kinds, right? There's special relationships and government regulation, but in the end, there's really 3 that we encounter most often. Commodity ownership is anything from I own gold mines in Australia and Iraqi oil fields, to like I have a client who in the US who he's a grower and he has 60% of global production of a specific kind of ginseng, which is that herb that makes you feel better and is good for your health. It's a rare species of ginseng. It can only be grown in this one area of the US, and it's totally regulated. And he has 60% of the land. And the only people in the world that can use it or actually use it are Chinese in China. So he has a complete lock on the trade, right? Another example is disruptive tech or UX. Douyin, TikTok is a very good example of an ecosystem that just blew everyone out, right? But the one that's most accessible to everyone watching this presentation is brand equity. It's something all of you can do. It's what you've done, right? And it's something you need to focus on. So when we talk to brands, we look at these 4 areas. When someone comes to us and says, hey, I want to go to China. Hey, I want to be on Tmall. Hey, I want to do JD, whatever it is. We ask ourselves these questions. While commitment is important and the right resources is very important, and there's a number of other things that are big factors, what really matters to us is brand strength, okay? And brand strength isn't about your size. It's a question of timing. And what I mean is, does your brand have enough traction, forward momentum, inertia to allow us to convince the category managers here that you see, Tmall support or JD, whoever the category management is, to give you free traffic and get you into the event calendar? Because if we can't get the support and you don't have enough growth, then you're going to get killed. And this is why there's that big gap between the winners and the losers in China. So you essentially don't want to launch until you have this traction. Once you have this traction, that timing, okay, you can get Tmall support, and this creates a vicious cycle of winners and losers. And it's really that simple. So this is how we design an unfair advantage. We look at your brand, we help you get to a certain point of strength, and then we use our relationships with Tmall to get the support that no one else has to basically give you nitrous in your car. So you're in a car race, and we pull up anchor, we put in the nitrous, and you're the only car with it, and then you can win. And that is something you guys need to really focus on when you come in here. So as an example, one of my clients, Duvel Group, we launched them last year, and from day one, it just looks like an overnight success, right? It's just a ridiculous success story. Everything we did turned to gold. But it's not because as much of us as it is about the fact that they laid the groundwork. The foundation for the brand was there. And I'll show you what that was. But, you know, in general, the achievement is and I have to update these slides. You might be wondering, did they get hurt during COVID? To give you an idea, last month we did 5 million. We did, what was it? 3 million in 2 minutes on a live stream. I mean, this brand is raging hot, but it's because of the foundation they laid with consumers. And it looks like this. So outside of Tmall, so that the activation is happening outside, right? And being brought inside. And so you look here, one of the key points was this brand, this group of brands is sold in a lot of places in China. They have 8,000 points of sale. So they're in bars and restaurants. You don't even think about it, right? But in China, the last like 5 years, craft beer has exploded. And AB InBev, the biggest, you know, beer maker in the world, has invested heavily in building that market and creating it. And Duvel's just, that whole group is just lumped onto the back end of that traction and grown tremendously. So they have a huge fan base, right? Offline. So these guys over here that you see on the left side, these dudes, they are actual store owners. These are little store owners that carry Duvel's beers and that love them and do their own videos. So they're like little mini KOLs, right? They're little mini influencers themselves. The second we launched Tmall, they launched our affiliate program because this Douyin activation that they're doing links directly to Taobao. So their stores are selling direct and they're getting commission from us in the Tmall store. So things like this, you guys have to understand, it doesn't happen in a silo in China. Everything that's happening offline is already online. Everything's instant and it's merged together. It's like a big stew. So you're probably wondering, what's the point of all this, right? How can you get traction? Well, the case of Duvel, you know, it was very intentional, right? They came into China, they have a long-term investment. They basically rallied all of their assets and resources and concentrating them in an online success. And it worked, but it's not the only way in. And what I want to tell you, which is the good news for everyone on this call, is that 90%, I hate to say it, but it's true. It's actually, I think it's over 90%. I've never done the actual data, but it's more than 90. But let's just say it's 9 out of 10 brands that are successful in China that are foreign. It's an accident. It's a happy accident. It doesn't mean that they aren't successful organizations, know how to run a brand. It means that the techniques and methods they use to build their brand overseas also appeal in China. Okay, so what are those options to get that accident? Well, the most obvious one that everyone knows is word of mouth marketing, right? But a big one for you guys in Scandinavia is local resellers. So I have a client in Denmark, and you guys would know the brand. I'm not going to tell you on the call, but if you want to know after, I'll tell you. But essentially, he has a lock-on trade for a specific commodity. Like, he's literally the biggest retailer. And the way his business grew is he had physical locations in all of Scandinavia, but in particular Denmark and Sweden and places where Chinese were traveling a lot. And essentially the Daigou community, that word you see here, are cross-border professional shoppers. They shop for their friends and family in China. And so they would come into the stores and do like videos, show themselves wearing the jewelry and doing all this stuff. And basically within about a 3 to 5 year period, the brand exploded, and they did, I don't know, recent fiscal year was something like 130 million euro in sales. And all of it came through this type of accidental activation. So word of mouth, local resellers and traders, influencers and daigous. But you know, this all sounds pretty abstract, I'm sure, to you. So let's do a concrete example. Now, Allbirds, I don't know if you guys have ever heard of this brand, but it's very similar to a lot of the cool brands I see coming out of Scandinavian countries. I'm actually currently working with several, and I think as a culture, you know, as a, not saying you're all the same, but as a group of states, like nation states, the way you guys specialize in areas where you're strong, and that your land area is small and it's hard for people to compete in those markets, it makes it easy for you to create these channels down here where Chinese have to kind of go shopping. They're forced to go down those paths. So Allbirds is a similar option. This is a direct-to-consumer brand from the US, and they launched their store on Tmall last year in April. And right away, it was a success, right? It was like considered like an overnight success. But, you know, I've been doing this a long time, like 7 years, right? And I know there's no such thing as an overnight success in China. It just doesn't exist. I mean, okay, it happens, right? But it's so rare, right? There's always something behind it. And what I also love about these direct-to-consumer brands is they didn't exist 5 years ago. Actually, Allbirds didn't even exist 3 years ago, right? It's a new brand. So we can see exactly what happened, right? So let's take a look. How did it happen? Did they really have an overnight success? Actually, they didn't. We had my whole research team went back and looked at all the data. And the nice thing about China is you can get access to data you can't in Amazon and other places. You can see everyone's sales and you can see everyone's demand. So in March of 2018 was the month, as you can see here on this chart, that this brand went from 0 to what I would consider a commercial launch, right? So what you're looking at on the left side is the search index for this brand in March of 2018. So it was at a low, like a low point, and then popped up to this level. Now, if you're asking an operator like us, and we're looking at this terminal in the back of a store, and we see this social RNT at this level, this search index, you can build a multi-million-dollar brand with this. Now, notice the brand launched their store a year later, but I can tell you that they could have launched anytime after March of 2018 and been very successful. How did they do it? Did it happen in China? Nope. Here's what happened in March. They launched shoes made from trees. They opened up pop-up stores in Canada, which again, Canada is similar to Scandinavia, low population, few places to shop, tons of Chinese walking around and shopping and shopping for friends at home there. And they did aggressive PR on news media. And all of this content, all of this activation, it's spilled into China. It was a massive syndication of trade media, and it worked super well. And it's something everyone that's listening to this presentation can do. And they didn't know about it. So that's what I mean by a happy accident. Just running your business properly. So D2C brands have an advantage. When they come to me, they don't show up with like a marketing manager who's like ancient, like Fred Flintstone in the cartoon, right? Like they show up, the first person I end up meeting with a D2C brand is often like founder and then the head of influence, like the influence team director, right? And then you meet, head of growth, right? Who's really a performance marketing guy. And then you'll meet like head of PR or, someone who's in charge of community. And she's, a real expert at getting people to engage. The product development and design team. You never talk to traditional titles. And that's because D2C brands that do things right, they focus on two things. They focus on a core strength in communication and in growth marketing. And I think that's something you guys can all do. So why does it work? It works because of a very simple axiom. People follow people who follow brands in China. Say it to yourself 5 times. People follow people who follow brands. And here's the big one. And those people follow other people who follow brands outside of China. So the key influencers in China follow other key influencers outside of China. So if you really want to seed the market, instead of spending money with influencers that aren't known in China or aren't really popular with Chinese influencers, the simple solution is to concentrate your resources on seeding an influence with people outside of China that are worshipped by people inside China. It's really that easy, right? And it works for everyone. So Allbirds, they did it through syndicated trade media, and many brands like this handbag brand I mentioned before, or like Strathberry from the UK, they do it through influencers. But you can spill, the idea is here, right? You want your content to spill into China. So I'm going to wrap this up so we can have Q&A, but I want to leave you with another thought. I have launched more than 100 brands into China, and I've met with more than, I think the running tally is about 600 or 700 global brand executives, right? Retail executives. And, you know, I get everything, right? Like I always end up with commercial directors, right? And they're always concerned about, you know, domestication, inventory, logistics, 3PL, you know, what kind of model are we going to use? What kind of structure? Oh, show me the numbers. What is my P&L going to look like? You know what's ironic about all of that? None of those things on this puzzle matter. I could throw them all, I could burn this puzzle because there is one piece that matters more than anything else, right? It's activation, right? It's traction. It's your growth traction in China. It's strength, right? It's your brand's level of resonance with Chinese consumers. Nothing else actually really matters. And I hope you guys listen to that, because if you do and you focus on strength as a guidepost, you can't go wrong and you will win eventually. And I think that's it. Just want to thank you all for listening, and I hope this wasn't too long. Thank you. We'll have Q&A now. Peter, you're up.
Excellent, Josh. Thank you so much. Very, very interesting. See if I can find the Q&A thing here. I think as you are the host now, wait.
Oh, let me.
I do see the Q&A window here, so.
Yep, guys, go ahead into the Q&A and type questions. Otherwise, you're going to have to listen to Peter and I talk. So type your questions. I'm happy to answer anything you got. And one note, I know I'm a Yank, but actually 75% of my clients are European brands. So forget the whole Americana thing. Actually, that is actually a small part of my business. I think only 10% of our business is with American brands. We actually do quite well with European brands in the market and Asian brands. That's something you should know as well.
So maybe I should start with some questions then to get things going. We talked before about the size of companies.
Yeah, just talk. Go ahead. Size of companies. Keep
going.
So
what would you consider a good starting point in terms of revenue or in terms of resources rather?
Well, you know, for my purposes, I don't really care how much you do in revenues, and I'll tell you why. So New Zealand, I used to do a lot of New Zealand brands when they were all the rage a few years ago, especially with cross-border on supplements. And what I noticed right away was that it actually didn't matter how big the company is. It really matters how popular they are with Chinese influencers and consumers cross-border. That is the single key feature. What I would say to you as a brand is, you know, you can't be a $1 million company, right? You're not going to have the resources to do China. China is going to cost you money, right? You're going to have to put inventory there. You're going to have a team operating. You're going to need, you know, a good activation plan, a very good operating plan, and you're going to have a lot of people and energy committing to all these resources, marketing and otherwise. So I think realistically, you know, your business needs to probably be in the range of 20 million plus euro in global turnover to sort of justify the investment of coming into the Chinese market. Otherwise, I think it's going to be too resource heavy for you. And we found that to be the case with New Zealand. Although some of the brands, there's a, you know, this weird Manuka honey mask was this small farmer produced this mask for women. And I think they did 80% of their sales in China. It was like a $30 million business, and 25 million was in China, and only 5 was in New Zealand. So really, I'm not concerned about the size of your company, just whether you can have a commercially successful launch in China. And that's the most important thing. You know, in my experience with the cost load of having sort of a marketing agency doing all your, you know, seeding and PR and, asset creation, combined with, you know, somebody like us who's operating the actual stores and doing all the performance marketing, you really need to do at least 8 million RMB in sales, like 7-8 million RMB, which is a little bit more than a million to €1.2 million to make money. So, you know, having like a $500,000 business in China, it's very hard to be profitable. You really need to do at least 1 million. And the resources to do that can be substantial depending on the competition in the category. So I would just say, make sure you can plan for that investment, and that your brand already has the traction, and then you can be profitable very quickly. Like Duvel made money in the first month, but a lot of my clients struggle for years if they're not at scale. So the biggest experience I'm saying to you is there's no rush to launch. Launching a commercial success, like I said, it's about brand strength and support from the platforms. And if you don't have both, you really can't make money. It's very, very hard. So the best thing to do is to get the seeding right. And then when you launch, your resources are lower and your ROI is much, much higher. And so bottom line, if we do less than 500,000 RMB a month in sales for a client, they're unhappy. And when we hit over 500, they're happy. That's the threshold. If you're in cosmetics, you have high margin, you might be happier with us when we hit 300 or 4. Like maybe you can live with a 600,000-700,000 euro business a year and make money, but most clients can. If you're in fashion, you need to do well over 10 million RMB. You need to be closer to like 2 million euro to break even in some categories. Does that make sense?
Yep, it does. Thanks.
Up, we got a question. Are American brands and European brands equally popular in China, or do Chinese people prefer one or the other? Great question. I'm probably not in a position to answer that because I'd really have to look at doing, deep survey. But what I would say to you is that if you follow trend, then it's really geography agnostic and specific. So I wouldn't say it's European brands, right? Because not all of Europe is popular in China. But let me give you an example. The last 5 years for Scandinavian brands have been phenomenal because for some reason, and you could probably thank IKEA for this, for training Chinese consumers the last few generations to like Scandinavian style design, which is clean, efficient, modern, contemporary, and largely inexpensive and stylish. And that's very, very popular in China. So anyone with a brand that positions themselves around that geography can do really well. But as an example, if you were from Poland, it's not going to help you. But if you're from Stockholm, you're okay. You can leverage your geography as an advantage. American brands are not largely popular, right? Certain kinds of American brands are popular. So for example, American direct-to-consumer brands are very popular in China. Like emerging hot brands really are popular. So hotness has less to do, like I would say London right now has a hotbed of brands. I would say Scandinavia has a hotbed. Italy is starting to have a few interesting brands. France is knocking it out of the park. Germany for long tail. So we run a couple of very large German brands, but they're like the number one in their subcategory. So, compression stockings, like something that requires an obnoxious amount, of engineering, and that the Germans do super well. They tend to perform well. So I think like every country has its specialty. For sport, America is really dominant, right? But not in fashion. That's not true at all. And I think there's pretty wide open in a lot of areas. I'm working with a Finnish fashion house, really home goods and fashion. It's a fairly new company. It's like a D2C. It's 5 or 7 years old or something. It's not a very old company. They're doing super well. Like their traction with Chinese consumer communities and influencers is incredible. It's better than some of the best brands like Calvin Klein, for example. Next question. Are there clear advantages to having physical stores in China while selling through the platforms? Have you experienced any connection there? Oh man, that's impossible to argue with. Let's do it this way. This year, half of all fashion sales are going to be online, but in a lot of categories, you cannot avoid having physical stores. You do, right? If it's just something you have to do. So, and there is a link between size and physical presence, for sure. Scaling, getting to that billion RMB category, 2 billion RMB, you do need to have a physical footprint. Initially, though, digital first strategies do work as I outlined. So doing the seeding properly in certain categories, you can, right? You don't need physical stores for a lot of different product lines. You need them for things like fashion, like things with high return rates. So, for example, eyewear, most fashion categories, denim, for example, you really need to have some places for people to try on. And it's more than just the physical presence. It's also a credibility thing, and it lowers your return rates because you can have really bad return rates on Tmall if you don't have physical stores, and that is killer. So like you may have a high gross sales number, but your net sales are going to be low and your logistics cost is going to be super high if people are constantly what we call bracketing. So bracketers, I don't know if you guys know what that is, but a bracketer is someone who is your most loyal consumer on your e-commerce store. But the problem is they treat their living room like the new showroom. So they essentially go and buy like 20 things. And remember, Chinese people have tons of cash. So they'll just buy like 20 things, try on all of it and keep one or two, right? The good news though is freight costs in China are super cheap. It's like $2 to $3 euro max, like €2 to ship a package in tier 1. But even so, it gets annoying and it's just labor intensive. So depending on your category, physical stores are necessary. In a lot of categories, they are not. So if you're in beauty and cosmetics, not necessary at all. And many categories, like any kind of consumable, you do not need a physical store. I think if you're talking about an initial launch, like you want to launch right now, I don't see any reason not to do the digital first, go with activation through the digital sphere, and then later launch physical if it's necessary. But I don't see it being a huge ordeal to not launch physical stores. To give you an idea, we have 15 clients currently on Tmall, so 15 stores, and I think Duvel, Uneasy, I think only 20% of them, yeah, so 3 or 4 actually have physical stores, and a lot of them are doing extremely well without a physical presence. So you can build a sizable business online in China. An option besides a physical store is to wholesale and franchise, which is what most of my clients do. I mean, Duvel doesn't have its own stores, right? They're wholesaling and doing on-premise. So, you know, you could have a strategy, it's tried and true and it's well-worn and everyone does it. It just has some issues with brand control, right? Managing your IP use. But having franchisees and resellers do the physical side is a very viable strategy. And it will give you a wider range, a bigger reach, and a more sizable presence long-term. So I hope that's helpful. Anyone else? I only saw 2 questions here.
I do have another one. I follow you on LinkedIn, Josh, and I've seen you a couple of times mention the scare tactics that the competition is using. Not to scare people off here, but it was really interesting to read about the thugs in the store and so on. Maybe you could talk about that for a minute or two.
Yeah. So sabotage is what you're referring to. So, yeah. So I think, you know, I mentioned it. China's a totally different world, for good and bad, right? We're talking about a bad side of China. I don't enjoy this part of my job, which is either giving, you know, good people bad news when they come to me and say, hey, I'm screwed by my distributor. He's stealing my IP, or he took this and that, and having to do a take back. I don't like giving people bad news. The other side is because we're an operator, we get attacked all the time. And it's very typical. It's like, I'm sure this happens in other countries, maybe not in Europe, but it does happen in the US, like industrial sabotage. It can be common in some industries. But in China retail, it's very common. It is very common. And it's most common when the marketplace is mature, meaning like your brand has been selling and a lot of people have been sitting on your equity. So essentially pretending to be you, or stealing that traffic some way, or making counterfeit products, you know, misrepresentation, fraud, whatever's going on. and you come in and you launch the official store, the authorized store, they see that as a direct threat to their business, and they should, right? But their business is illegitimate, right? But they're doing it anyway. So when you come in, they don't care what tactics they use. And some of the most common ones online, and then I'll talk about the offline ones like thugs, hiring gangsters and stuff. But the most common one we get is they do a number of things. They file fake complaints. So one of my clients, I'll tell you who it is just because it's funny, is Rubik's Cube, right? So Rubik's, there's so many people that have copied Rubik's, even their trademark, they can't get it back. Like there's so much sabotage around this brand, it's impossible to succeed. And they had an issue where one of their competitors, it's actually one of the factories that makes their cubes, competes with them. So it's what we call co-opetition, right, in the platform. They saw that Rubik's was gaining some traction. So what they did was they filed a complaint in the name of the CEO of Rubik's in London. They made it look like the complaint came from the London office to the two heads of category at Tmall. Now, the only people that would know who those individuals are, because you can't find them anywhere, right, are competitors who have relationships with Tmall. So we knew who it came from, right? But they filed a fake complaint, and Tmall freaked out. They threatened us. They're coming back like, how dare you, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, we finally convinced them after a few days that it was fake. But it took a lot, and they were originally going to blow us out of an event. So that's a very typical thing. Like, they lie. And so they'll use that kind of thing. They'll pretend they're you, almost like a Nigerian scammer, and then send fake emails in or complaints. And they do it to government officials. They'll hire a third party to, for example, say that you haven't paid your taxes, or say that you've never sold this product at a certain price. Like, they know the little rules, the specific regulations for products in a category. And if they see that you've opened yourself up to attack in some way, they test you. So they'll go and file these complaints. Another thing they do is create fake orders, which is a very common practice. They'll have like 1,000 people place orders, not finish the order, complain about it, write bad reviews. And this is just absolutely killer, right? So the only way to do it is to counter that is to prove that the stuff is fake, that the orders were fake, and counterattack. So, you have to have a barrage of new positive reviews come in. So essentially, if you just treat e-commerce in China as like war, that's a good indication of what you're going to have to deal with. Offline, last year, when I had a client, we launched for 11/11 because I knew they had a lot of competition, and we didn't let anyone know what was going on. So we staged a private launch through a black box event, which means no one knew about it, with the category managers. And it was super, super successful on 11/11. I think we took 57% of the sales of the brand in the category. And man, did that piss off people. The next day, we got like thousands of fake orders launched in. One of the competitors was so mad, they hired like gangster thugs to go to my client's office and do a sit-in and squat, right? And threaten them. It's just unbelievable. So the good news is, though, when you work with an operator like us, or just someone who's very experienced with domestic issues in China, we have resources, right? So they sent the thugs. Well, you have gangster thugs. I have a gangster lawyer. And this guy is the most ruthless guy I've ever seen. And he can just call in a favor and the cops will show up and arrest all of you, right? So it's just, when you work with a good operator, they're prepared for this. Like, we know it's going to happen. I just think most brands are unaware. They think it's like always going to be easy, or it's the same, or, nothing like this is going to happen. But China really is a different place. It's a minefield. There's lots of cultural nuances, and you just have to know how to deal with each and every situation. So another form of sabotage, we had a consumer. This isn't even really sabotage, except that the consumer was so mad. They knew their rights, so they went and filed a complaint with the Trade Commerce Bureau and accused the brand of having a fake trademark and not doing its corporate registration documents correctly. And as it turned out, my client is an Italian brand. They hired an Italian attorney in China to do their registration, who actually screwed it up and didn't file the document right. So the trademark was okay, but then the tax bureau and the Commerce Bureau found that the document was not right and that the registered address was going to a place where no one was working. They never updated it, right? Then what a disaster. So then we had to get involved and like hire an agent and like do all this stuff. Otherwise, they were going to shut down the store, right? So a single consumer, because they refused, my customer refused to give them a refund and take back the product, went and sabotaged the brand to the point where it almost shut down their store. So my recommendation is to just give them back the money. You know, like, don't mess with these consumers. They know their rights. They know how they can make trouble for you. And they all have the ability to do it with a few clicks of their button on their phone, right? Just a few taps on the screen, it's trouble, right? And Chinese will go out of their way for that. You know, they really will. Right? They'll go out of their way to use whatever leverage. And that's the word you need to remember. It's all about leverage in China. Everything is about leverage. So, you know, our business is focused on two things, right? Radical transparency and honesty. So like we are very straightforward, like brutally honest with clients, because you just can't hide China. Eventually it's going to come out, right? It's like having a dead body in the closet. It's going to stink eventually. There's no way to hide the skeletons. So we're just brutally honest, as you've seen in my LinkedIn post. Like we share everything. We just, there's no competitive disadvantage to just sharing the truth. In fact, in China, it's like a revolution, right? Because everyone's trying to cover things up and do non-disclosure as a business practice. And the other thing we believe in is deeper connection, not just with consumers, because, you know, my customer service team is like an assisted selling team for clients, right? They're assisted shoppers. They're like professional shoppers for consumers. We have a very deep relationship with consumers, with the platform managers, with anyone that can work with us, with the influencers. It's a very hands-on environment. And we believe in deeper connections to the key relationships that drive success in China. And it's like more important than you think, right? You think in e-commerce, it's like Amazon. You don't have to talk to anyone, everything's robots. There's no optimization, you know, there's just no work. Amazon is so much easier than China, right? Because I showed you a little snapshot of it, but it's a very, let's think of it as rugby, right? It's a physical sport, right? You cannot avoid physical tackle, right? You can't avoid having to engage both the positives and negatives of commerce in China. And I don't want you to be scared of it, because when you work with a good operator, we're used to all this crap anyway. We're used to taking abuse. So we have to deal with it. You guys are just going to be surprised by it. But I go back to my principles. I go back to my foundational elements. None of the sabotage matters with brand strength. Brand strength is, you can just blow these guys up. The stronger you are, the less likely they'll attack. They look for weakness and they look to see if they have leverage on you, right? That's what they want. If they see they can't beat you, like you're stronger than them, they back down and they walk away because they know you can do the same to them, which is what we do, right? I'm not saying we're perfect birds, right? We do attack. If someone attacks us, we defend ourselves. So you've got to be in a position to do that and know what you can do, know what your rights are, and know how to handle those situations, because they come up. They come up, and Chinese are very clever and they know how to make trouble. So and from my standpoint, it's easy to fix those problems. We got another question here. David, another one of his tough questions. Sweden is quite campaign focused on fashion. How do consumers behave in China? Are they more likely to buy when there are sales and discounts? You mentioned earlier that they have cash. Yes, they do. The answer in China is both. Both. You have to do constant campaigning, and you're going to have to do selling and discounting. If you're in the premium space, not as much, like Dainese, which I showed you earlier. We've been number one in the category in protective, rider sportswear for, motorcycle racing. We have never discounted in 2 years, not once. I mean, consumers can pick up a few coupons, but that's it. There's no discount. It's full price retail. It's very successful. We're going to do 20 million this year from 0 last year. So you don't have to discount. But consumers in China want a deal, right? They will negotiate with you. So if you ask my customer service team, here's a statistic I didn't include in the presentation, probably something you should think about. Around 30% of all of my sales, even during events, are done through human hands, assisted shopping. So my team will physically talk to the consumer to get the sale. And the conversion rates are really high, like 40%. So it's great, right? And it counts towards your store conversion rate and your product conversion rate. So it's excellent. The negative side of that is about 8 in 10 consumers either ask for one of two things: a discount or a free gift, right? Or both, if they're ballsy. And they'll also ask you to prove that what you're selling is real. So you've got question one: how do I know it's real? You prove that you're the real thing, either through documentation or otherwise. They have to believe that you're the real brand, that they're buying from the real thing. Once they believe you're authentic, then they go into the negotiation. It's all about whether you're going to give them a deal of some kind, and or special services and VIP treatment. So think of it as like a white glove 5-star concierge service, no matter what you sell. Doesn't matter if it's fashion or any other category. And the concept of campaign-based fashion, it does work very well in China. So you can continue with that, and I would use it for product seeding, and I would use it for market seeding because it works exceptionally well. And but what I would say to you is you got to do it more than 3 times a year. Like in China, you need to do it like every day. Like it's a very intense operating environment. So we're doing constant activation. So campaigning, activation, seeding, PR, live streaming, all this kind of different forms of marketing and seeding. It's very, very important. So you need to do it all the time. The best way to avoid discounts is to have great gifts and something that's limited. So very hard to get. If you have those components, you don't need to discount. But it's hard. You're still going to want to do something for them, even if it's just coupons, baskets, bundles. There's all different things you can do. Some brands, like we ran Beats by Dre for Apple, they had a policy of no discount or limited discounting in the flagship. Essentially, only during events would we discount, and that was only like a maximum of 2 to 3 times a year. So you can also have that policy where you just only discount when everyone else is discounting. So like yesterday, for example, is the last day of, or today is the last day of 618 on your time zone, right? June 18th, which is a very big event. It's the second biggest event of the year. So most of the brands we're working with, even the luxury brands, have a slight, not discount, but a deal, right? An amazing gift with purchase, some type of special collection they're giving, a bundle, something. Did that make sense, David? Hope so. Any other questions?
I think it's time to round off here, and I thank you so much, Josh, for a very interesting presentation. Maybe you could put your contact details up there.
Okay. Let me just answer. I see
Moss
is asking just one more question. How sensitive are the Chinese when it comes to delivery times? Very. So let me explain what we're used to in Taobao. My wife, we were in Shanghai, and it was Saturday morning one morning. It was around 10 a.m. And I was barely awake, right? I just got my coffee, I haven't done anything. And there's a knock at the door of my flat. And I go out, and there's an installation crew with a television. And I'm like, oh, what are you guys doing here? You got the wrong address. I didn't buy a TV. And the guy's like, no, you didn't. This is all in Chinese. Like, oh, no, you did. You bought a TV. I'm like, no, I didn't. No, I didn't. And he's like, no, you did. See, look. So I look at the order. I'm like, all right. So I scream back. I asked my wife. I said, hey, Kate, did you order a TV? And she comes out and she says, I just ordered it. I'm like, what do you mean? So this crew comes into my house, installs the TV, sets up my modem, my router, Netflix, and a VPN, which you need in China to get access to outside things like Google and stuff. Set up the VPN and Netflix. I was streaming my favorite show on Netflix 2 hours, from the time my wife clicked buy now. Now, let me tell you about this. I didn't pay for that. It was free, right?
Wow.
So when I talk about delivery, I do want to be specific. If you are selling cross-border into China, unless you're selling something they cannot get in China, don't do it, because it's not going to work. So you have to have something very interesting, unique, rare. You have to have control of that commodity. So let's say it's some kind of Arctic bird, right? It's up in Lapland, right? It's reindeer nose powder. I don't know, something that they can't get in China and can only be harvested by Swedish people in northern Sweden, right? That during the winter, then you can, do whatever the hell you want. They'll wait for it because it's like a rhino horn, right? It's something they cannot get, right? But if it's something that, they can get from someone else, we deliver, just to give you an idea, if an order comes in, it's almost always delivered same day. The latest would be next day in about half of the country. And the maximum is 3 days for delivery. And during events, you get, because of the package volume, consumers will wait 7 to 10 days during 11/11, but normally not. They'll cancel the order if you can't deliver in 24 hours, 48 max. So that's a reality. So I would recommend you guys do domestic commerce if you can. And the way you do that is you find an operator like us that will allow you to use their entity. So a lot of the operators on Tmall and JD, we have different star ratings. We are what they call a multi-starred Tmall and JD partner in the domestic pool, which allows you to essentially, we can take over stores from distributors, we can host brands with our entity. So you don't need to have a company in China. My company can host for you, things like this. So you just find someone who's got the right credentials and you steer clear of cross-border. Now, when do you get away with cross-border? You would get away with cross-border on regulated categories or rare items. So cosmetics, beauty, skincare, things like this, you can extend the delivery times and consumers will wait a little bit. They'll wait for rare luxury goods, stuff like that. But if it's something they can just buy from another Taobao store domestically, forget it. You can. And they're very, very, very sensitive to delivery times. Here's something else that's going to scare you. Your shipping record, your track record in delivering orders, the speed at which you deliver and satisfaction is a matter of public record. So your Tmall store or Taobao store or JD store actually has a ranking called a DSR, which has 3 components. One is how well you describe and accurately describe the authenticity of the products and the content. The second part of it is customer service, how well you handle people. And the third, and that includes your reviews and all that. And the third is shipping speed and logistics and returns management. And it's actually tracked by the platform and consumers can see your rating. So unlike Amazon or other, your own website, consumers don't know how well you served customers. Actually, you have no control. It's a matter of public record. So really, if you're going to go to China, you got to play by those rules. So just understand that slower delivery times, it's like being in a sailing race and you're throwing an anchor off the back of the boat. You're just going to drag yourself down and you're never going to win. Or it's hard to win. I hope that's helpful. Last
Very
question,
much.
if there is one. This is it. But let me see about, I think we've lost some, I don't know where I can put, there's a message to participants here. I'm trying to figure out, sorry, my screen, I'm using, let's see. Okay, so here is my contact info. So for anyone that would like to contact me, You'll see my email. It's actually very, very easy. It's josh@kungfudata.com. You see that cell phone, that's my Hong Kong cell. If you add that in WhatsApp, you can text me. And my WeChat, I didn't include here, but if you want that, I'm happy to give it. It's a different phone number, my China cell. I'm really easy to reach. You can email me or message me on WhatsApp. We'll schedule a time to talk. If you want more content like this, we publish a lot. Just add me on LinkedIn, and you'll get tons of this in your feed.
Great, and you can also contact me, and I will pass on the contact details for Josh. I just want to say thank you so much for a very interesting presentation, Josh, and I hope we can get some more brands your way and further into China as well.
Thank you, Peter. I really appreciate it. I hope it was helpful for everyone on the line. Good luck, stay safe, and I hope to see you online in China someday. Take care, guys.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.